Have you ever been out in the field and you think you absolutely
All
nailed your
right.
shot, but then you get home and look on the computer and your photo is missing details and it's full of noise? Well, I've got you covered in this episode.
Damn it. Hey guys, thanks for stopping by. I want to show you some new techniques that I learned to help deal with some of my higher ISO images. Oftentimes in wildlife photography, we have to shoot at high ISOs or ISOs, whatever you guys want to choose as your terminology. But the result of that oftentimes are lower quality photos, high noise. Different cameras have different abilities to handle these scenarios, and some of them are very, very expensive. I want to show you a way you can deal with high noise in your images and still create a clean image. So I'm going to show you two photos. One is this photo right here, and then a similar moment here is right here. So it's the same bear, just different scenarios on the river. In this second image here, he was in the shadows. We might have been, I don't know, 50 feet away from this bear. He was fishing, but it was late in the evening and he was very shy. He didn't really want to interact with us at all. So this photo here, he was in like the darkest part of the river. I was shooting at 25,600. And then this photo here, he kind of moved out of the shadows a little bit and started to go up this little stream to look for salmon. And it's a little better light here, even though it's really dark. So I'm gonna show you some tricks to deal with this. And then I'm gonna do a whole video. I'm gonna do this in little pieces. So this is just an editing technique. And then I wanna do a separate video on what to do in the field, exposing to the right, what does that mean, how to do it, all that stuff. So I chose to boost my ISO really high so I don't get any blurring, or I can minimize the blurring in the bear here. So this other image right here, it looks kind of rough, but I'm able to turn it into this image right here. It may not be perfect, but man, is this way better than what I had before. So oftentimes when you edit your photos, you probably throw it through some denoising software where they use Lightroom, Photoshop, Topaz, whatever. Sometimes you'll get these splotches. So when I first edited this photo, I threw it through some of my best software. I like DxO Pure Raw. Whenever I have a high ISO image for Northern Lights, Milky Way, wildlife, I throw it through that first. And that does a really good job cleaning it up. I'll show you an example here in a second. But this bear, do you see the splotches? So there's like some green banding, there's some pinks in here, there's some green in the fur. Now there are times where animals will have green in their fur, like sloths, they have algae and stuff in their fur. But this bear, I remember what he looked like. He did not have green in his fur naturally, right? So this is due to a few things. One, it depends on how this photo was processed through the denoiser. Sometimes when you boost shadows, there's not enough information in those shadows to create the correct color. So it just amplifies the signal of your sensor. That's all on modern cameras. That's all the ISO is boosting your signal of the camera. And that's why you get all these funky colors, right? So as a result, you get all these weird colors. It's in this other photo too, but I'll show you when you throw a photo into DxO Pure Raw. Here's the original photo. Even though I tried to expose it to the right, I didn't want to go too high with my ISO, too low with my shutter speed. I was shooting at about f5 so that the eyes and the face were sharp in the bear. When I throw it through DxO Pure Raw, I know it's still dark, but it looks way cleaner. It just cleans it up so nicely. So if you look at see all the graininess, and you can see the color noise here before, right? And you can see the green splotches. When you throw it into DxO, it just cleans it up really nice. So before I even do any editing, I try to throw it through the big stuff first, get rid of the noise. All right, so I'm gonna open that up. I'm using Affinity Photo 2, which works very similar to Photoshop. About last year or so, I got rid of all my Adobe products. And I've been happy ever since. So this technique involves two different things. It involves an Affinity Photo. It has a really nice feature called frequency separation. And then it has a really cool tool for color replacement. So I'm gonna start with the more dramatic example is this bear here. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna raise the exposure so that it looks like a normal photo here. I'm gonna lower the highlights a bit. All right, don't worry about the bottom of the image. You know, if I was processing this for real for like a magazine or for a wall photo, you know, I would usually I would play with this first, see what the exposure looks like, and then I'd go back and separate the layers to deal with the hot spots. But when I raise the exposure here, you could see this purple banding in the bear's fur, right? And that's not natural. That's not what the bear looked like. Now, there are different color bears. This is a Kodiak bear. Sometimes they're blonde. This one was more of a chocolatey color. You know, they range in their color here, but this is not, you know, purple was not on the list here. So what you do is you go to filters and you go to this frequency separation. It's going to take your photo and it's going to separate it into a texture layer, which is your high frequency, and then your low frequency is going to be your tones and contrast. So what you're going to do here, I've been playing with this a lot. I like the radius of this kind of blurring, and I like Gaussian. I don't think it really matters in my experiments. 2 pixels is great. I find 4 pixels is too much. So I'm going to apply. It's going to separate the layers here. So it's keeping our textures, and this is something I could even use to sharpen the photo a little bit. But I go to low frequency, I make sure that's selected. I go to this color picker, replacement tool. Now you notice in the corner, and I'll try to zoom in here, there's the eyedropper, there's an upper layer, and then a bottom layer. So the way I remember this is your top layer, or that first circle, is gonna replace whatever the color is below it. So what I do here is, you could do this a few different ways. You could hit Option, and then I try to make the brush really small. And then what I like to do is reverse it, and then I'll select that. And you could either open it up all the way, which sometimes I'll do, or you could just hit Option and then select an area, and that'll do the color picker tool. I kind of like opening up the color panel, even though it takes a little bit more time, because as I choose different parts of the high noise image here, see how it's different gradations of like magentas and purples. You're gonna have to go through and find each tone of the noise to really completely eliminate it. I might just do a quick edit today, right? And then you can hit X just like in Photoshop, right? So my top layer is gonna be the color of the fur, so I'm gonna pick that. It looks pretty natural right there. And then I'm just gonna make sure my bottom layer is, it's kind of magenta-y. All right, so then what I do, it depends on your style of editing. I like to just bring it up to 100% opacity, just hit it hard, and then you just kind of paint it. And then soon, you can see in the image here, it's going from that really purpley, here's a good spot right here, to a more darker, more fur colored, right? Brown. The problem with this is you're picking one color and replacing one other color. So that's where I said you have to go through this and probably do it a few times. Because see in here, there's like this little hot spot of purple. It actually did a pretty good job this time. So what I'll do there, I try to do the whole purple first, and then I go through to the hot spots, but just for sake of this, I'll select that. There we go. There we go. And again, it's just replacing these magentas with a more natural fur color. And I picked a spot of the bear that I thought looked the most natural. If you're gonna do this well, you wanna go through and take your time with it. There we go. So his arm looks a lot better, and I might even make it a little darker. So it's a little more homogeneous here. And then sometimes the bears, depending on the season, they'll have like weird tufts of fur and stuff, all right? But that looks really good compared to where we started. All right, there's a spot right there, still looks like it needs a little work. All right, I'm going through this new tone here. I'm trying to get rid of the, see, if you look at the color picker tool, how much of a stronger tone that is. All right, because it's natural when you think about an animal, if you've ever watched an animal in the wild, depending on where the light hits, the fur is going to reflect different colors. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's not purple anymore, which is all I really care about. So that looks a lot more natural. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I want to pick an obvious spot, kind of over here. See how the nose and the snout is really green? We're going to go to our bottom layer first. I want to make sure I find kind of a greenish spot. There you go. And then the top layer, I want it to look like the rest of the fur. So I kind of like that. Just getting rid of these green tints, because you know, and I know, what the fur is supposed to look like. But when you run it through these denoising programs, it's just gonna do everything it can to try to get rid of the noise, right? So that looks pretty good. Now, if I was gonna do this for like a print, so there's splotches in the fur here. So then you just do the same process. You make sure your bottom layer is this kind of greenish fur. And that's where sometimes opening up the color palette, the way I like to think of it is this bright color here is like the base, and then as it fades out, you have your highlights, right, your midtones, and then your shadows of that color. So sometimes it helps me to look at that, because I know this is kind of like a green color. So I want to pick a spot on the fur. It looks like a green. You can see that banding through there. Let's pick that one. Okay. And then our top layer, that's what the fur looked like. Right, and then we're gonna do this. All right, so that came out a little too red. All right, so we're gonna try it again. We just pick a different part of the fur. For this, so we're just gonna pick, yeah, that looks a lot better. And then you just kind of paint. So that looks a lot better. I don't see the green splotches there. All right, and then there's another spot right here where I see kind of this really uneven tone here. So I'm just gonna go right there. And since I'm trying to remove about the same level of green, that seems to have worked pretty good. All right, that looks really good to me. I still might work on this down here, so what I'll do is pick this spot. I like that, and then there we go. That looks more there, like that tone looks a lot better. It's less purpley. Now, it also depends on what you're doing with this photo, right? I've said this in other videos. You could enter it into a photo contest if you're doing this for a publication or a wall print. Some of these techniques may or may not violate your photo contest. You have to check the rules. I'm just, I don't even know if I would publish this, but this was a really cool moment on the river. It was my wife and I, and it was just this bear, and we were just watching him fish, and he was just being a bear in nature, and it was really cool. And I actually like when he turned to go upriver. I really like this moment right here. This is one of my favorite frames. But when I went to edit it the first time, I saw all these splotches, and I was, I didn't know what to do. So I had been working really hard to kind of figure out different techniques in Affinity Photo to get rid of all this uneven coloration. So I'm really happy with that. There would be a few smaller edits, but as far as making this look more natural, that's what I would do. All right, so to show you this example, same process, I'm gonna show you, so this is really dark, right? This is where you're gonna see a lot of the banding. I'm gonna raise it up before I do that. It's just gonna drive you nuts. So, people have different opinions on what makes a good photo, and one of the things that is mentioned is distractions in your images. You want nice clean images. That's why photos from Katmai and those types of areas, like Clark, do really well in publications or photo contests. You get these beautiful sand flats and there's just not a lot of distractions. But I still think photos like this are really cool because this is also, on Kodiak, they're also forest bears, right? And they're in the streams, there's sticks, there's all sorts of stuff. So this does reflect their natural habitat, right? So what I did here, because I've already edited this photo like 6 times to prepare for this video, I know the fish and stuff are gonna be too much of a distraction. So I just kind of separated the layers. So I just wanna emphasize the bear. And then when I do stuff like that to make it look more natural, I make a mask just like you would in Photoshop. So you make a mask there and to kind of blend this layer a little bit so it doesn't look so obvious. You just kind of paint it in, right? I like that. So I'm gonna merge visible just so we have a fresh start here. So DxO Pure Raw does a really good job with this image, but it's very, very slight. But when I've exported this image before, you could see in the circle here, you could see the green splotches, right? So what I'm gonna do is same process. I'm gonna go to filter, frequency separation, 2 pixels. The reason why I'm showing you a second photo, even though you probably get it by now, is I'm actually going to show you how to use this to also sharpen your image too. So like I said, the high frequency is texture, low frequency are tones, contrast, stuff like that. So the high frequency, I'm going to do the unsharp mask, which I always thought was funny because it sharpens, right? So I play with this a little bit until I see what I like. Some in there should be good. All right, so it just applied that to the high frequency. I did again. Yep. Apply. Okay, now the low frequency, we're gonna do color replacement again. And then let's do the fur here because that's a pretty obvious example, right? There's like this weird yellow tinting. I haven't found it yet. There it is, okay. So we're just gonna fix it a little bit, right? And then here you can see, right, it's like a yellow green. And over here you can see some purple. Looks like it fixed it still. There we go. All right, and then I'm gonna fix this kind of pink. So it's like a magenta and then like this green tone, and those are pretty common with these kind of high ISO images. So I'm gonna pick a part of the image that looked most natural to me. I like that. I remember hit X to switch layers. And see how this looks kind of purpley? That's what I want to work on there. So whenever I'm in the field, I try to remember what the animal looked like color-wise. So then when I go to edit, I can more faithfully recreate the photo. Now it gets hard when you do like a bear tour. You can walk away with like 3,000 images, so you just do the best you can. But this bear, I remember very well. This was a chocolate boar, no mistake in it, beautiful animal. But again, it's the way the light reflects will change the color of the fur. But see how now that looks more natural instead of that purple tone aspects of the photo. And then I'll export this one. And I know they're different color tones. This one's crooked. But that's because I played with this a little bit before the video. I'll just kind of export this too. Just the desktop, okay. All right. So that looks really nice. You know, I might play with the color tone a little bit. It looks a little warm. I might cool that off. But the arm of the bear looks even, like fur should. You don't have these weird green splotches everywhere. And then the other one, I skipped the fixing the nose, but look how nice the fur looks. That looks nice and even. That looks like what a bear should look like, right? So this frequency separation plus this color replacement tool is a really nice way to help fix those, you know, desperate situations. And you've got a photo, you're like, okay, I really like this photo. I want to save it, but I've got these weird splotches. How do I fix it? Okay, and I'm going to make a few more videos on other techniques, but this is like the most precise, but as you can see, it's the most time consuming process. But something I know I've been trying to do with my photos, I'm trying to slow down my editing style so I'm not just pumping out photos left and right. I really like to try to take my time, sit on it for a few days, re-edit it again. So that's something I've been playing with in my editing. So hopefully that helped you. I am gonna print up a PDF for Affinity Photo. I'm gonna try to make one for Photoshop. I don't have Photoshop anymore, but hopefully it's a guide for you to help figure out how to fix this splotchy, high ISO image, you know, difficulty with the shadow. So again, I'm really happy with these. I would feel totally comfortable with a little more tweaks submitting this to like a magazine or a photo contest, as this looks like a more natural image to me. So let me know what you think, and if you found this helpful, subscribe and check out more of the stuff I have coming along. Thank you.